Receptionist, please bring my vitamin.
I'm coming, doctor.
Vitamins good, keep me well, make me feel good. Good. That's Seafood City, 1826.
We got 9 or 10 shots in the 7th Ward. We got people down.
Is one area of the city where you're looking at 6, 7, 8% of all of the shootings citywide happening in just a half-mile circle.
It's one body after another one, and it's so sad, so hurtful. We got kids walking the street, and it's going from night to day, and it's a hurting thing. We need somebody to step up and help us.
The 7th Ward is one of the 17 wards of New Orleans, Louisiana. Geographically, the 7th Ward is the 3rd largest of the 17 wards of New Orleans, after the 9th Ward and the 15th Ward. The 7th Ward has a population of 10,552 and a crime rate of 10,995 per 100,000, which is 369% higher than the national average. Residents have a 1 in 10 chance of becoming a victim of any type of crime. The 7th Ward has long had problems stemming from poverty. The 7th Ward stretches from the Mississippi River to Lake Pontchartrain. The eastern boundary is Elysian Fields, the boundary that is geographically close to the 8th Ward. In the direction to the southwest, the boundary is Esplanade Avenue, the border closest to the 6th Ward. From where Esplanade meets Bayou St. John, the boundary follows the bayou north to the lake, with the 5th Ward being across from the bayou. The 7th Ward is home to many family-owned businesses such as bars, restaurants, bakeries, corner stores, hair salons, and barbershops. Many of the families that reside in the 7th Ward are of Creole heritage, with last names such as Fontenot, Egru, Beret, LaCour, Arsenal, LeBlanc, Robichaud, just to name a few. Per NOPD crime stats, the 7th Ward, which is part of the 5th District for years, has been amongst the most violent wards in the city, giving the 9th Ward a run for its money.
7th Ward. Police said they got a call this morning to a home on North Durgeois near Columbus Street. That's where we find WDSU's Aubrey Killian joining us live this afternoon from the scene. Aubrey, do we know how this woman died?
Well, first, Christina, this neighborhood, they are stunned and really just heartbroken. Behind me, I want to show you a memorial is growing for the woman who was found dead out here. Neighbors have actually set up flowers out here. So this is out here on the 1500 block of North Durgeois Street. At around 7:30 a.m., officers, they responded to a call of a stabbing. NOPD found the woman outside a home and she was stabbed multiple times, according to investigators. The woman was then rushed to the hospital where she was pronounced dead. Police are working right now to figure out who is behind this deadly stabbing and really what led up to all of this. I spoke with one woman who knew the woman that was stabbed. She says she was well known and loved by so many here in the neighborhood. She can't believe that this all happened. Take a listen.
This is a close neighborhood here. And to have this happen here, it's eerie. This is not natural. This is New Orleans. This is 2021, and you're killing people behind a car. A car. I don't get it.
So again, there is a memorial that is growing for this woman who was killed out here. No arrests have been made. Police are still working to figure out a motive. Of course, if you have any information on this, you're asked to call Crime Stoppers. That number, it is 822-1111. Reporting live, I'm Aubrey Killian, WDSU News.
In the mid to late 80s, before trigger play would be at an all-time high, hood fights would be the thing, with crews such as the Ballad Boys earning a reputation in the streets. The Ballad Boys, who started off as a group of partners jumping shop and being on a few mills, would soon graduate to the next level. In both junior and senior high school, most of the Ballad Boys would actually be band heads. Don't get being in the band twisted with being suckers. The Ballad Boys were not cowards by any means, with some of the original members being Steve Dolphin, aka Ballad Boy Steve, Irvin Green, aka Boosie, Kirk Jackson, aka Ballad Boy Kirk, Brian Turner, aka Black Brian, and Fat Frank, who was one of the first hustlers out of the crew. If you know, you know. One of the notorious Hardy brothers out the Yo would even run with the Valley Boys. With the surge of that hard in the late 80s, homicides would drastically increase in the 7th Ward, with 22% of the homicides happening in the city taking place in or around the 7th Ward. The St. Bernard Project, aka Pilot Land, will be labeled as one of the most dangerous projects in the city. On the high side, the St. Bernard Project has historically recorded over 13 murders per year alone. For example, from 2001 to 2005, there were 44 homicides and 680 serious and violent crimes committed in the Bernard. The biggest mistake made when it comes to the 7th Ward is the misconception that all the women are bad red bones and the dudes are high yellow pretty boys with curly hair. Fucking around downtown, you'll find out soon enough that this is hardly the case. Contrary to popular belief, the Bernard wouldn't be the only violent neighborhood in the 7th Ward. Crime was skyrocketed in the 7th Ward with the rise of the newer generations. In the 80s and 90s, there was somewhat of an unwritten rule in the streets. Women and kids were off limits unless, in fact, the woman was actually involved with grimy street shit herself. And the NO don't for 1 minute believe that the men are the only ones that are involved with hustling, violent crimes, and homicides.
New Orleans police are looking into the murder of a woman last night in the 7th Ward. This happened just before 10:30. Officers arrived on the scene near the intersection of New Orleans and Rocheblave streets and found a 33-year-old woman had been shot. EMS took her to the hospital where she died. Police say the coroner will release the victim's identity. If you know anything that can help investigators, you're asked to call Crime Stoppers.
As the younger generations would jump off the porch, crimes will become more violent and more frequent. 4 men, all brothers and alleged members of the 7th Ward F&D gang, were sentenced for their roles in shooting on Mother's Day in 2013, along with other gang-related crimes. F&D Punk worked in the 7th Ward and committed acts of violence, including shootings and homicides. F&D hustled in and around the Frenchman Meat Market, a convenience store located at the corner of Frenchman and North Derby. F&D was notoriously known for using intimidation, violence, and threats of violence to maintain the gang's control over its turf that extended from Elysian Fields Avenue, North Johnson Street, the I-10 Interstate Highway, St. Anthony Street, and North Claiborne Avenue. The Mother's Day shooting during the second line would leave 20 people injured. The shooters were alleged members of the Frenchman and Derby gang, aka F&D.
Police comb through a neighborhood stricken by violence on what should have been a joyous celebration. Hundreds were in the crowd at the annual Mother's Day Second Line Parade when shots rang out, striking a dozen people. The youngest victim was just 10 years old. She is said to be in good condition. Those enjoying the parade are in shock.
My family was second lining in the parade, and then all of a sudden it just stopped and everybody started running and we wondering what's going on, and they shooting and they say children was shot and everything. It's just time to stop with the violence. It's not cool. It's Mother's Day. Who want to lose a child on Mother's Day?
EMS reports 3 people are in critical condition, but no one was killed. One neighbor saw victims collapse in front of her.
I just opened my door today and 2 guys just collapsed right down my steps, and me and my daughter did the best thing we can to revive them, and I think we helped save another life today.
Police say more than 10 officers were patrolling the second line. They saw 3 men run from the scene after shots rang out down Frenchman Street toward Claiborne Avenue. The gunmen are still on the loose.
These are unusual circumstances. We have second lines that occur in the city of New Orleans virtually every weekend at this time of the year. We had a full complement of police officers. It appears that these 2 or 3 people, just for a reason unknown to us, started shooting at, towards, or in the crowd. It was over in just a couple seconds. Police were everywhere.
It's the area's second shooting in a week. Now neighbors are pleading, stop the violence.
I don't like this to happen around here. And then on the Mother's Day and the children involved with it too, why we can't have peace?
Travis and Aiken Scott, Creole pronunciation Akeem, were sentenced by U.S. District Court Judge Ivan Lemel to life in prison plus 10 years for their involvement with F&D, while Sean and Stanley Scott would each be sentenced to 40 years for their involvement with F&D. PCB, another crew of young killers, would also hail from the 7th Ward. Jamal Clay, a.k.a. Young Maul, was a demon out here in these streets. PCB was beefing with multiple dudes at the same time. F&D out to 7, YMF out to 7, not to be confused with Young Melk's Mafia, Bird Gang out to Noya, BMG out to Florida, and the Goonie Gang out the Ville. The state would charge Maul with second-degree murder in the death of Roger Gordon, who was gunned down in a courtyard of the Ville May 22nd of 2009. Roger was hit up standing next to his cousin, an alleged member of the Goonie Gang. One of the Goonies had crushed 2 dudes from the Wildside Gang out to 6th Ward. PCB allegedly clicked up with the Wildside and went with the move when Roderick was deleted. The state would later arrest and charge 5 men: Jamal Clay, Travis Burke, Joseph Kemp, Quincy Jackson, and Dominic Grant. Joseph, Quincy, and Dominic were all alleged members of the Wildside Gang out to 6th Ward. The jury will convict Travis Burke, aka T Streets, of second-degree murder in January of 2011. He was given a mandatory life sentence. The state's case against T Streets will rely on a sole eyewitness who would also implicate Maul as a shooter. DA would later send a notice to T Streets that the man who had witnessed the murder told prosecutors he and Maul were not the killers. That witness, who claimed that there were 3 attackers rather than 5, had not been called to testify at T Streets' trial. T Streets will petition the Louisiana Supreme Court to review his conviction. That request would be denied. Meanwhile, the DA would offer deals to the other defendants. Quincy will plead guilty to manslaughter, agreeing to an 8-year sentence for credit for time served and the remaining time to be suspended, meaning he was eligible for immediate release. Joseph and Dominic pled guilty to accessory after the fact to second-degree murder. They would both agree to 5-year prison sentences, but like Quincy, they were given credit for time served. The remaining time was suspended. Maul would decline to accept a plea deal and prepared to go to trial. Judge Fleming granted the state's request for a continuance when a material witness against Maul refused to show up to court for his trial. The other defendants pleaded guilty to various charges in exchange for release. All chose to remain in jail and wait for his day in court. All, who had already been locked up for 4 years, would eventually enter an Alfred plea in front of Orleans Parish Criminal District Court Judge Tracy Fleming, receiving a 24-month sentence with credit for time served. A rash of violence will continue in the city. 4 men convicted of a murder-for-hire plot that saw a federal government witness in a Medicare fraud case flamed in Chile will be sentenced to life in prison during a hearing in U.S. District Court. Wood Age III, Ronald Wilson Jr., and Stanton Guillory will be found guilty of murder for hire and conspiracy to commit murder, in addition to a slew of other crimes connected to the 2012 smashing of Milton Womack. Milton had struck a plea deal with prosecutors to testify against Lewis, who allegedly ran a fraudulent health care claim scheme. Before Milton could testify, he would be shot to death as he sat in his truck in the 2700 block of Urbana Street. Lewis A. Jr. allegedly ordered the hit. His son, Lewis A. III, and Ronald Wilson Jr. allegedly coordinated the killing. Stanton Guillory would smash Milton. Lewis A. Jr., Lewis A. III, a.k.a. B. Lou, Ronald Wilson, a.k.a. Tank, and Stanton Guillory, a.k.a. Nan Nan, were all sentenced to multiple terms of life imprisonment for their roles in the murder of a federal witness in a healthcare fraud case out of the Middle District of Louisiana. This was the story of the violent streets of the 7th Ward.